Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure today to invite you to this conversation with Umang Bedi on his behind the scenes journey in creating enormous success along with his partner Viru at Daily Hunt. Together, Umang and Viru have built a very interesting, exciting company, and today he shares with us his learnings and his lessons. Please welcome Umang Bedi, co-founder of Daily Hunt.
Thank you so much for having me.
You already know, Umang, that I'm a big fan of you. And when I heard that you were going to leave your, significant leadership role from a, well-known corporate and become a sort of co-founder and entrepreneur, I was very surprised. I hadn't pegged that. And I think many of us have this notion corporate leaders will not take up the risky job of entrepreneurship. So, love to hear how you made this happen.
When I turned 40, my wife describes it like a little bit of a midlife crisis. I started asking myself, what's my true purpose and where do I want to go from here? I think three things were very clear to me is that one, I didn't want to move to a corporate headquarter role or out of the country. Two, everything that I was doing, I was questioning in terms of what's the real impact that I'm making? Am I spending a lot of my time with these awesome corporations in managing headquarters versus focusing on impact? And I think the third one, which was a burning desire, is how do you get 1 billion people into India's digital narrative, right? And I decided that when I looked at myself in the mirror, what am I without that fancy title? Right? And that was a hard question. And I wanted to explore that question a lot deeper. And so for me, it was a journey of transformation on the personal side, in terms how I could get a lot more healthy, transformation with the family in terms of the amount of time I'm there for them. And third, transformation of a real business opportunity where you have the ability to drive a narrative end to end, own the product end to end, and have that experience. And so I would say in retrospect, it was the best decision of my life. I wish I had made it 10 years earlier while I was at 30. But at a flip of a heartbeat, I think this was the best decision. And I think what it has taught me is three things. The first is humility. When you have to run a corporation and also look at how you pay the bills and raise equity and investments, it keeps you very humble. The second thing that it's really taught you is how do you scale with limited resources, right? With a multinational, you always have tons of resources at your beck and call, and these are awesome tech companies, but how do you recreate that magic, albeit to a larger or a smaller scale, but being confined with limited resources? And I think the third thing that it helps you realize and respect is just the value of creation. Very often in the corporate world, you're not controlling the product creation. Or you're not controlling that attribute. You're controlling more the go-to-market. Whereas this really gives you the power to create. And I think if you stop creating, in a way, there's a part of you that dies.
Often, when a young company is trying to communicate who they are and what they are, there is a balance of vision and detail, and you have to find that answer through which you can effectively communicate. So how do you translate a business narrative to a story of vision and purpose for all the stakeholders to get behind you?
When Viru and I came together, it was driven by one purpose, that how do we create a large multi-billion-dollar digital media company in an open market where the duopoly dominate? Now, how do you sell that journey internally to a team or to a group of stakeholders, whether it's your board, whether it's your employees or your partners? There are two things that really help. One is if you can help establish shared vision on what's the purpose that you're solving for. The moment you frame the purpose as a zoom out, wherein you're trying to build or trying to bring 1 billion Indians into the digital narrative of India, right? Because the moment you drive connectivity, the moment you provide information, you help society or people with knowledge, with contribution to their education, with jobs, which ultimately helps the overall GDP. The method in terms of a how is it's less effective when you preach out. It's more effective when you try and just paint a big why, or a, why do we exist kind of a question, and let the teams come to an answer. And there are creative ways of doing that. You can divide your team into 5 parts, let them come up with statements or keywords. The one that we've used in the past is divide the team into 4 or 5 parts and let them make 5 paintings. It's important that you remain hyper focused, you ruthlessly prioritize on the top 2 or 3 metrics that matter. For our journey, for instance, it was pivoting from being a news aggregator to a true blue digital media platform. And so for that, we were clear that there were 3 or 4 metrics that matter. One, explode local language content in terms of supply. So go from a 800 number of creators to 100,000 creators. 2, explode the genres of creation. So pivot with not just news, but everything else, right? 3, grow the user base, right? 4, measure the time spent. And 5, translate that time spent and user growth into revenue. So I think that's what we've done, but let it come from the team. Don't reach out to them. People don't, they're senior leaders. They have more years of experience and more domain knowledge of experience from the areas that they operate in than you do as an entrepreneur. You can never know it all. And so I think allow people to flourish and get out of their way, and just act as a conductor of the orchestra versus someone who is, physically doing everything and owning every, taking all the credit for everything.
This crisis today affects everyone. So what are your learnings that you can share to other leaders to think through how to engage in this transformative journey that all of us need to do today?
The fact is, we should have been smart enough to realize that a recession is going to come, right? It's never going to be all sunny days. We're definitely going to see some troughs in that journey. I think we as business leaders need to introspect, look back into history, and do a little bit more soul searching there, that this is going to happen, and should have had better expectations in terms of planning. So that's one. 2, I think the opportunity that this provides is proven in the 2008 pandemic. When you look at the stock market on NASDAQ, there were 6,640 odd companies that had $1 billion plus in valuations. Now that was basis real PE multiples, right? Versus what happens in the startup world. About 9% of them, or about 500 companies, actually grew IRR during 2008 and 2009. And if you study that journey, it's really built on some really solid fundamentals. One, pivot the business to where you see the opportunity in terms of what you're serving. And you notice that the businesses that have done that are not just gaming and OTT and EdTech and those kind of businesses, but there were tile companies. There were companies in very traditional businesses. There were companies in manufacturing that are also listed there. A great example that I was talking to a friend of mine was, he runs one of the largest export houses for garments, and all his businesses come to a complete stop. He was at a point of firing factory workers. And then he realized that there's this massive opportunity around PPE suits, around masks, and around PPE jackets that you and I as consumers can wear everywhere, right? Which are more trendy and fashionable. And he's pivoted his entire business, and today has more orders and demand than he can fulfill, right? So I think watching those trends, whether you're, in digital businesses, it's a lot easier because you don't have a physical footprint to solve for. But here is a manufacturing example, which I was so heartened by, and such an inspirational story. At our end, of course, we've pivoted towards growth verticals. We've pivoted advertising towards where we are moving to more performance versus brand. There are loads of those examples in the digital world. But my guidance to entrepreneurs is focus on a real business. Focus on real unit economics. This is the time where you can't throw dollars at growth. The market's not going to reward you for that. What you have to be looking at is profitable growth. And so if you're in the digital business, think about everything organic. But you've got to keep your eye on the ground and ensure that you preserve capital. You do right for the long-term longevity, because you have to get out of this cycle. Someday it'll bounce back, right? Whether it's 6 months or a year. I'm not an epidemiologist or an economist to really predict that. But you got to think of a 2-year runway to your business, a minimum 2-year runway in terms of conserving cash. If you have less than 6 months of cash in the bank, then you've got to be smart about raising capital. Valuation is not important right now, survival is. And so I think you need to be doing things that are practical for your survival and existence. And if in this period you're able to grow IRR and actually grow your business post COVID or post the pandemic, the market's going to reward profitable growth and profitable unit economics far more than it was traditionally rewarding just volume based growth.
What's your philosophy of managing execution?
So one, I would say hire people who are smarter than you. You can never be smart in every domain. So you got to find the best people in the business and typically don't hire for your clones. That's probably the worst way to hire. Second is empower them, right? Empower them to make decisions and to fail and fail fast. Third is form a unit of metrics around execution, which is micro. Micro to the extent that it's 5 or 6 tangible metrics like I described earlier, but it is measurable on a week-on-week basis. And then I kind of use a very simple system, because the moment you complicate it with balanced scorecards and too many jargons, it'll always fall through. Just keep 5 or 6 key metrics around for which each leader is empowered and responsible. And you clearly call out if it's a leader or a cross-functional group. And on those metrics, I use a traffic light phenomenon. If it's green, I'm not going to ask you why, I'm just going to praise you. If it's yellow, I'm going to ask you the hard questions. If it's red, I'm going to jump right in, right? And you do this on a weekly basis in terms of a rhythm. And what I've really realized is you got to sometimes just move out of the way, right? And empower people, because what happens most of the time with founders is they suffer from founderitis. And what I mean by that is they kind of believe that what they know is the holy gospel and the holy truth. And they're not open to ideas. And I think the best ideas can come from anywhere in the company. So, for instance, if you're building some part of the product and you're establishing product market fit, you as a founder needs to be out on the road with your consumers to see how they're interacting with your products, because there's no research agency that can really give you that feedback. So you've got to be more hands-on in that phase. Or if you're in a B2B SaaS sales environment in a young startup, you probably have to do that first mega multi-year deal, right? And then have a way of teaching it to your staff in terms of what were the key drivers or what was the value proposition. And so I think early on, you got to be far more hands-on, be a leader, but then very quickly become that teacher and ask them to scale it, because you can't be everywhere at all points of time.
How should one think about monetization? When should you worry about monetization?
When you look at the best tech companies on the planet, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, the fact that they could defer monetization for a while was just because their organic growth on users was so high. Now, that's the question to ask. Is your product market fit or your product so awesome that people are just coming to it organically? More often than not, that's not true. What I've seen startups do is burn a lot of money in terms of the acquisition journey, whether it's in the payments business, whether it's in the streaming business, whether it's in the digital business, whether it's in the deliveries business, whether it's in the commerce business, right? There's a lot of burn that they use to bring customers to them. That's not organic. The moment you're at that point of time where you know that you are having to burn money, you have to figure out monetization and you have to start thinking about it. And when you think about monetization, you've got to think about what are the tech pivots that you're going to do to make that happen. Now, in the case of if you're in the digital advertising business, you can't do it without building a performance platform, because that's where a bulk of the money is spent on digital advertising. If you're in a transaction-led business, it's how do I make that transaction a lot more seamless? How do I build long-term subscription plans, right? How do I show value to the consumer? Unfortunately, these thoughts come a lot later, and then they feel force-fitted into the product experience. They're not integral to the experience from a core standpoint, right? And so my guidance is, why do we all love Google search? Is just because of the simplicity of the user experience and the accuracy, right? You open a tab, you expect water. Don't show me 20 other features that you're building. That's not what the consumer wants to see, right? Give him that instant attribution or gratification, what he or she is looking for, with the best product experience in a simplified fashion. And try and build in monetization as a layer right up front if you aren't seeing organic traction on your business, right? We've looked at volume and velocity of content and virality of content, right? So the three V's, volume, velocity, and virality. And that's what's moved our journey from being a news aggregator to a digital media platform in local languages for Bharat to now a pure play social platform where we've gone full-fledged social effects, right? And so that's how you've got to start thinking about it. I hope I was able to contextualize that.
How do you think about, failure or setback or whatever word you want to use in the journey to success?
So one, I think you need a very, very close thought partner to share your low moments because it's very lonely. You can't talk about it openly to the media, for instance. For me, that partner in crime and that brother in arms is Viru. The level of intellectual honesty that we have, the openness that we have is, I would just say, the most special relationship on the planet for me personally. But I'll give you an instance where I was not intellectually honest. And this was way back as the time when I was 27 or 28. I was the MD of Intuit. I was leading Intuit's expansion outside the United States. And cut a long story short, but the company, I was reporting into the CEO, I was really young. The company and the global management team wanted to do X. I felt it was the wrong thing to do. I didn't have the voice to voice it out. And that product line or that launch was a complete disaster. And the company had burned over $20 million investing into that product. And so when I was talking to the founder, I just said, hey, I felt very frustrated that I knew it in my gut, but I didn't have the ability to open my mouth and share that. And that's led to such a big loss. I'm devastated. Why wasn't I bold enough? Because I was afraid of all the bigger titles and people with more experience above me. And what he told me shocked me. He said, that's an integrity issue. And you can question everything about me, but just don't question my integrity because that's something that is very deeply core to who I am as a human being. And he explained to me that integrity has various levels. Integrity without compromise, and the important words are without compromise, really means your ability to speak up even when you think that the larger audience or your stakeholders may not like what you're going to say. But you have to have the ability to say it with rationality. I think you need to find that personal board of directors or those personal friends or those people who will keep you intellectually honest and then act by it. Because there are lots of lows in this journey. I mean, the amount you fail is not even funny. You just want to be able to fail fast and move on.
Umang, I really appreciate you taking this time. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You know a person, but there is always so much you don't know. And I learned a lot out of this. And I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much for having me, Vani. It was an absolute pleasure. Really, really appreciate you having me as well.